It was like finding a secret doorway, and it led me to God.
Truth offends, but truth sets free.
In the previous episode, we compared total depravity with utter depravity. Total depravity means that every area of man was affected through Adam's fall. If a man has, say, 200 areas like his thoughts, his desires, his plans, his emotions and feelings, and his knowledge, his opinions, and so on, then each of these areas has been affected. Consider one area, the motives of your heart. Certainly, this area also is affected. But that doesn't mean that every single motive is wrong. No, some motives may be good. But what is that goodness compared with the rest of our depraved nature? It is like a lovely mango in the hands of a leper. Nothing is wrong with the mango, but because the man is seriously diseased, you wouldn't touch the mango. The goodness of the human is like that mango. It isn't worth talking about because man's nature is leprous. Before we continue into episode 5, let me deal with a few questions that were raised. The first question was, original sin is the sin passed to us from Adam. But did Adam himself have original sin? The answer is no, but it is explained in episode 5. The next question was, why did Adam sin? This is an important question. You see, Adam's sin was unlike the sin of any other human. We all sin because of our corrupted sin nature. We are sinners. And therefore, as those who have already become totally depraved, we sin. When we are tempted, our nature of sin cooperates with the one who is tempting us, with the tempter, and our lust makes us gravitate towards the temptation. But Adam had no such natural predisposition. In fact, God made him upright. He was naturally inclined towards doing right. So, when he sinned, he did it by choice. He did it deliberately. His heinous crime was not just that he ate a forbidden fruit. His sin was not in the act of eating the fruit, but in the meaning behind the act. In his rebellion, man's message to God was, God, we do not want to be under your authority. We want freedom from you. We want autonomy. We want independence. Just leave us alone. That is so heartbreaking. It is not something to be dismissed lightly. This attitude of man is reminiscent of Satan's feeling in his fall. The next question was, when exactly did Adam become depraved? Well, Eve had a long conversation with the serpent and shared her thoughts with Adam. Somewhere in that period, the rebellion was birthed in their hearts. But it was at the moment they ate the fruit that many things happened. Their eyes opened, they lost the 7 blessings that God had given them, and that was the moment of their fall. And from that point on, Adam was filled with shame and guilt, and he hid from God. The next question is, does Christ's death on the cross remove our original sin or our total depravity? No. Total depravity or our sin nature is never removed from us. But as we die with Christ, we die to the nature of sin. Through this crucified life of dying daily, the sin nature in us is weakened. A dying man is not influenced by things around him. The next question is, do I sin because of my free will or because of my original sin, or both of them? Now, before I answer that, let me first say something. The free will of Adam before the fall was different from his free will after his fall. Before his fall, Adam's will was totally free. There was no fallen nature influencing his choices. But after he fell, he still had free will, but it was a fallen free will. It was a will that was inclined towards sin. So, was it really free then? No, it wasn't. But we still call it free will because man was still a free agent able to make decisions unlike other creatures. Now let me answer the question. Do I sin because of my free will or because of my original sin, or both? We sin both because of our free will and because of our total depravity. The final question is, if there is something called original sin, is there something called original righteousness? Indeed, yes, but we do not call it original righteousness. We call it imparted righteousness, or in a single word, sanctification. For a better understanding about this, please listen to the Justification by Faith Alone series, but I will also be dealing with it in episode 5. Now, in this morning's community post, I had asked 10 questions as a form of a quiz or a test to see if you have understood the 4 episodes. So try and attempt answering that and send in your answers. Now, we are going to listen to episode 5, but it is important that we recap what we heard in the last episode. The total depravity of mankind, a simple definition is this, that we are incurably sinful and morally corrupt. That's right. And we are unable to help ourselves. That is a very, very important statement. We are unable because something in us will not accept that. As we proceed, as we progress, you'll realize how important that line is. Because there is a part in us that will reject and refuse to accept it. Total depravity is something so important. It all begins with the fall of man. The fall of man has been reduced to a mere ordinary Sunday school lesson. Adam and Eve ate an apple and God chased them from the garden. This is our understanding of the fall of man. But it was Saint Augustine who actually explained the fall of man in proper detail. He had a right understanding of depravity. Total depravity refers to how terribly man has fallen, and it is from his understanding that we are building up what we are learning. Last week we compared total depravity and utter depravity. Total depravity tells us how every area in our lives has been affected by sin. Utter depravity means every area has been affected and affected completely. We studied the imagination tube. This is the area of our thinking. What does the Bible tell us about man's thoughts? We read in Genesis 6:5, God saw that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Now let's just break this down briefly. You'll understand it. God saw. First of all, understand God can see our thoughts. Our thoughts are visible to God. Okay? Then the second thing, note, every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Do you realize that? This is total depravity. Now you may say, I don't think I'm that bad. I don't think only evil thoughts continually. First of all, you're a born-again Christian, so I'm talking of a man of the world. So this is the state of his mind. Now the question automatically arises, so are you saying that people cannot have good thoughts? So how do you define good? When you say good, what do you mean by good? How do you define good? Let's ask this question, okay? So was Hitler good or bad? Answer me, was Hitler good or bad? You ask a Nazi, was Hitler good or bad? His answer is ready. The Nazis thought he was God. Hitler brought Germany out of political and economic depression after World War I. Hitler was a lover of animals, a great protector of wildlife and nature, and he loved mothers. He introduced Mother's Day in Germany. You ask the Nazis, they'll say he's good. You ask the Jews, 6 million of them were tortured in gas chambers and killed by this man. He organized it. So if I ask you, is Hitler good or bad? Now it's according to whose standard? The Nazi or the Jew? So can you see, we are divided in this understanding of the word good. So maybe you have an occasional random good thought. Compared to those one or two little good thoughts you have, the rest of it is like this garbage dump. This is the state of man before his fall. None of these areas were affected by sin before his fall. Why is it called total depravity? It tells us that every area has been affected. That's the meaning. Every area. There's no area that is untouched. But notice, there are spaces in the tubes that you see, which means you can be worse in every area. When a person reaches maximum in every area, then that is called utter depravity. Satan and the fallen angels, they are utterly depraved, which means you don't get worse and there's no hope. But we, as human beings, we are totally depraved. Now, I want you to note that because a sinner is not utterly depraved, he is still capable of good deeds. A sinner may treat another person kindly, he may love children, he may take his neighbor's dog for a walk. These are things, little kind deeds that he may show. But these good deeds don't make him better than who he is or cancel the fact that he is totally depraved. On the other end of the spectrum, we also looked at total goodness and utter goodness. It's just a mirror image of total depravity and utter depravity. Total depravity means a man is totally, every area is affected, there is no goodness in him. Utterly depraved means he's utterly sinful, he cannot become worse. So what is total goodness? He is very good and there is no sin in him. There's no human being who is totally good. But the angels are. They were created perfect. They are totally good. But their goodness is not perfect. There is a perfection in their goodness which is called utter goodness, which only God has reached. So God alone has God alone is utterly good, meaning there is no way God can be improved. He is perfectly and completely good. Finally, we looked at the terrifying words of Saint Augustine, which is something that we must really dwell on. So I spoke of it a little bit last week, but I'll make the statement. Let's read it. Those who don't know their own depravity will seek salvation through good works and end up in hell. Basically, it's this. If we haven't discovered our own depravity, see, this is an adventure where you're looking, searching, praying, and at some point the Holy Spirit begins to show you through some situation about what is in your heart, through a reaction. So when you understand what is inside you, you can do two things. You can deny it and say, no, I am not depraved. Or you can say, God, I realize you're showing me something in my heart. So accordingly, we react to it. If we don't discover our own depravity, then what is our salvation? Good works. Particularly in our churches, you find a lot of people who seek salvation through good works by not doing, as I mentioned last week, not wearing makeup, not wearing jewelry, not dyeing your hair, not taking medicine, and then the good works, paying your tithes. These are all good things. They are all important things. But if we are seeking salvation through these things, then we haven't understood our depravity. A person who understands his own depravity, he may do these things, but he will never seek salvation through them. So why do we do it then? The only reason we should do any of these things is because we love God. For any other reason, it will be wrong. And then finally, we introduced this topic, original sin, and that's where we left it off. Original sin is not the sin of Adam, but it tells us how Adam's sin was transferred from Adam to the rest of mankind. Adam's sin is the first sin. But how his sin came to us. See, as I told you, a man may be a drunkard. He may be addicted to smoking. He can't transfer that sin to his child. And yet the Bible tells us sin came from Adam to the rest of this world. The big question is how? That's what I'm going to study along with you in the short time we have. So it is a very weighted topic, and if you understand it, it will give you a better grip on depravity and ultimately the gospel. When we finish, there'll be, for those who love the Word of God, in the last 5 minutes, you'll say, oh wow, because you've understood something big you never knew before. So let us begin reading Romans chapter 5. Romans 5, 12 to 14. Romans 5, 12 to 14. I'm sure you wouldn't understand anything there.
Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over them that had not sinned, after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who is the figure of him that was to come.
Okay. We've read Paul's epistles, but they are so deep that we just skim the surface and don't really understand what he's trying to say. So, we're going to study today just these 3 verses, Romans 5, 12, 13 and 14. There is so much packed into those 3 verses. Therefore, let's begin by reading that passage together in a different translation from the Good News Bible. Let's read it together from the screen, everyone. Sin came into the world through one man, and his sin brought death with it. As a result, death has spread to the whole human race because everyone has sinned. There was sin in the world before the law was given, but where there is no law, no account is kept of sins. But from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, death ruled over all human beings, even over those who did not sin in the same way that Adam did when he disobeyed God's command. Adam was a figure of the one who was to come. A little clearer maybe, and yet too much for the head. So we're going to study little by little. Let's consider the last statement. Adam was a figure of the one who was to come. In other words, Paul is saying Adam was a shadow of Jesus. But can this be right? Let me say again, there is a most astounding doctrine in the mind of Paul as he expounds this truth to us. But let's question, can Adam be a shadow? A shadow resembles the real thing. In what way does Adam resemble Christ? Adam is the father of the fallen race. Adam is the man from whom we've inherited our depravity. How can such a man be a shadow of Jesus? When Adam was tempted, he yielded and was defeated. When Jesus was tempted, he resisted and he overcame. How can Adam then be a shadow of Jesus? Adam was cursed by God, and he brought that curse upon mankind. Jesus was the blessed Son of God, and he brought that blessing upon all mankind. How can this Adam therefore be a shadow of Jesus? From Adam comes condemnation. From Christ comes salvation. How can Adam be a shadow? The fact is, Adam is not a shadow. Paul doesn't say Adam is a shadow. Instead, Paul says Adam is a figure of the one who was to come. The Greek word for figure is typos. And that word typos is type or prototype in English. It is not shadow, but a prototype, a previous version. And we must understand that from all eternity, from the former eternity, Adam, or the first man, let's say it, first man, not even giving a name, it was planned that the first man would prefigure Christ. That was the plan of God. But in what sense was he going to prefigure? Certainly not in his character or his conduct. Adam is always remembered for disobedience. And Christ is always remembered for his obedience. So absolutely in no way is Adam a shadow of Christ, but in what way is he a figure of Christ? That's what I'm going to now explain. I will state it, then I will explain it. So, in what way is Adam a figure of Christ? As a federal head and legal representative. Just note that in your head, but I'm going to explain what it means with illustrations so that even children will be able to get something out of it. What is the mistake we make in thinking of Adam? There's a riddle that children sometimes ask. Who is the fastest runner in the Bible? Adam, because he is first in the human race. But the mistake we make is, we keep thinking that Adam is just first in the human race. That's the only thing about him. Like first day in a week, first man in a queue, Adam is also first man. Is that it? No. There is something far bigger about Adam. Some say, okay, maybe he is the father of all mankind. Is that something unique in Adam? There is another father of all mankind. Who is that? Noah. Noah fathered the rest of the world. Adam's unique quality is not just that he is the first man or the father of all mankind. There is something about Adam so unique that no other saint in history could ever possess. Not Paul, not Abraham, not Daniel, not David, no one but Adam, this wretched, depraved sinner. Only Christ and Adam have one thing in common. And what is that? It is divinely ordained by God, the sovereign God, that Adam's relation to mankind or his descendants should be the same as Christ's relation to his spiritual descendants. Let me say that again before making the final statement. Adam's relationship with his descendants is going to be the same as Christ's relationship with his spiritual descendants. Now, this is the statement. Because of that position, one acts on behalf of many. This is the important thing. When Adam acts, he acts on behalf of many. When Christ acts, he acts on behalf of many. That is the meaning of federal head and legal representative. Now I'm going to explain with two illustrations. So consider the first illustration of 20 trees. Imagine the day when these trees were planted as saplings. Were all 20 planted together? No. One was planted, then another, then another, then another, and finally all 20 were planted. Years later they have bloomed, they have grown, and that's what you're seeing. This is not a picture of Adam and his descendants. Why do I say that? You see, if the first tree that was planted was Adam, if that first tree goes bad, if it gets diseased, do the other trees have to be diseased? No. So this is not the right picture of Adam and his descendants. What is the right picture? This. This is the right, true picture of Adam and his descendants. Adam is the root, and the rest of mankind are the branches. They all share the same root. If the root goes bad, then everything will suffer because they share one root. In the previous picture, there were different trees with different roots. But the picture of Adam is one root and many branches. This is Adam and his descendants. Now, the health of the whole tree therefore depends on Adam, who is the root. Whatever happens to Adam, it's going to affect the rest of mankind. Let's look at another illustration. The illustration of an ambassador. Who is an ambassador? He's a diplomat sent from one country to another country, and there in that foreign country, he represents his home country. So that's the work of a diplomat. When he goes abroad, he does not speak for himself. He does not give his personal opinion. When he goes abroad, he speaks for his nation. His voice is our voice. If it's an Irish diplomat to Russia, then when he speaks, it is our voice together. He's representing us. Whatever he does, whatever he stands for, it is not a personal thing, but it is on behalf of our nation. So if he blunders, we are all blundering. The whole nation will face the consequence. It may even lead to war. Now, we may not agree personally with what he has said or what he has done. We may go on a strike and protest against what he has done. But that doesn't matter. That's the nature of a diplomat. His voice, he's speaking for all of us because he represents all of us. Here is a picture of the Irish diplomat being expelled from Russia. Do you know why they expelled him? Because they didn't like his glasses. No, it can't be. When they said, go out of Russia, they're rejecting the whole nation, Ireland. He stands for the whole nation. So, this is a picture of the position that Adam had. Just like the tree and the diplomat, Adam, the root, he represents or stands for the whole of mankind. Whatever happens to him, it will happen to everyone. Let me ask you a question. Where were you when Adam was created? Anyone? Mind of God. Spiritually? Yes. Very good, very good. That's the answer. That is the answer. All of creation, at his creation, all of us, all his unborn descendants, all of mankind, they were in him germinally or seminally. Is this scriptural? Yes. I'll explain to you so that you'll understand it, okay? This is the logic in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 10. What is the occasion? The occasion is when Abraham visited Melchizedek. Melchizedek blessed Abraham. Abraham was maybe relatively a young person. Now, when Abraham was meeting Melchizedek, where was Abraham's great-grandson Levi? He was not yet born. Levi was not yet born. He doesn't exist at this time. And yet, if you read Hebrews 7:10, what does it say? We look at it in the New Living Translation and in the Good News Bible. For although Levi wasn't born yet, the seed from which he came was in Abraham's body when Melchizedek collected the tithe from him. That's New Living Translation. Let's go to the Good News Bible. For Levi had not yet been born, but was, so to speak, in the body of his ancestor Abraham when Melchizedek met him. King James Version is not so clear, but that's the picture. Levi was in the loins of Abraham. He had to travel from the loins of Abraham to the loins of Isaac to the loins of Jacob, into and out of the womb of Leah, before he could utter his first cry as a baby, his first natal cry. So, if you can understand the argument that the grandson or the great-grandson was in the loins of the great-grandfather, then where was all of mankind? Where were you and I when Adam was created? We were all in the loins of Adam, so to speak. So, the entire human race was in Adam, and the entire human race stood before God when Adam stood before God. So when Adam sinned, we sinned in him. Levi paid tithes in Abraham. That's the argument. So also when Adam sinned, we all sinned in him. We ate the forbidden fruit with his mouth. We looked at it with his eyes, and we gathered it with his hands. Yes, we sinned. Don't say he sinned. We sinned through Adam. So He made the choices that day, but we have been ruined by his choices. So now that you've understood, Adam is not just the first in the human race or the father of the human race or a shadow. He's a figure of Christ in the sense, like all of mankind was in Adam, the whole spiritual seed is also in Christ. And that's the argument that Paul brings constantly in his epistle to the Romans. So now we're going to go back to the passage we began with, that is Romans 5:12 to 14. We've understood the last line. Let us now look at the first part of verse 12. Romans 5:12. What does it say?
Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the
That's
world.
enough. By one man sin entered the world. Do you even realize how profound this line is? It is fantastic. It is so big that by the time I finish this, your heads will be blown, if it's not blown already. Okay? For as by one man sin entered the world. How? I used to always think, how? Did he bring it in his pocket? What did he do? How did he bring sin into the world? This is what we are going to understand. Now that we have understood that Adam is a figure of Christ and how he's the first man and how important that is. Once you've understood that, you can understand the rest. But first, let's look at an analogy. I'm going to consider a prince. Let's call him Prince Albert. Prince Albert's father is the king, and Prince Albert is heir to the throne. So when his father dies, he's going to be king. But what no one knows is Prince Albert is doing drugs. Okay? And then, one day, he's found he's doing drugs. So the news media carries two stories. Two stories. It tells of how there are drugs found in the prince's body. That's not the only thing. The second thing that's breaking out is that he has now been stripped of his right to the throne. Prince Albert has been stripped of his right to the throne because he has drugs in his body. So that's the story going around. Keep this in your mind so that you can understand the doctrine that we are going to study. The two things that we are going to study, the two sins we are going to study, they are entitled original sin and imputed sin. We're going to look at original sin now. So please try and understand as I explain to you. As soon as Adam sinned, what happened to him? He became totally depraved. So remember this picture. This picture represents total depravity. So the moment Adam sinned, don't say there was an apple seed in his tooth or he had half an apple stuck here. Let's understand what really happened to him. When he sinned, he became totally depraved. What is the meaning of totally depraved? It means he is now corrupt in every area. In one line we say he is now morally corrupt. Can Adam change? Definition of total depravity. What's that important line I said? He is unable to save himself. This is absolutely true. It is in Scripture. We'll cover that later. So this is the state of Adam. He can get worse. I'm not saying his depravity will get worse, but he can do terrible things, but he can never become better. The first time I learned about Adam's fall, I had a thought. I said, I just wish I was there instead of Adam. I would never have eaten that apple. Have you thought like that? Huh? Why did he eat that apple? Because of that we are suffering today. If it was me, I wouldn't have eaten the apple. That's so silly. Let's understand, Adam was the best of us. Adam was not just God's random selection. No, Adam was the best in every way. He was perfect and innocent. What we need to understand is, if we were in Adam's place, we would do exactly the same. So let's not debate on that. So, now, think of Adam and remember the tree analogy. Can somebody tell me what the tree analogy is? Who is Adam? Of the 20 trees, which tree is Adam? Sorry? Okay. The one tree, yes. And who is Adam? The root. And the rest of mankind, the branches. Okay. In the diplomat analogy, what does a diplomat do? He represents his nation abroad. And he speaks for his nation. And whatever he says, it's the nation saying it. Whatever they do to him, they are doing to the nation. That's a diplomat. Now that you remember that we are branches in Adam's tree and share the same root. So when Adam sinned, we sinned. That is the reason when we entered the world, we entered as sinners. We didn't become sinners. We didn't come perfect and innocent, and then when maybe 2.5 years old, I committed my first sin and became a sinner. No. We came into the world ruined, depraved, because we are all Adam's seed. We sinned in Adam. We came as a hopeless people into this world, ruined. We were all polluted. Now remember this. Moral corruption means the poison of that nature is in us. Adam's depravity is in us. Like Prince Albert. What is found in his body? Drugs. Drugs found in his body. What is found in us? Depravity. We have Adam's depravity. His moral corruption. All that was in him. Now we have come into the world with that. No exception. Whether you have discovered your depravity or not discovered, I don't care. You are depraved and I am depraved. We are all sinners. This is the understanding of original sin. We have all got it. And that is why, because we have been born like that, we are born with sinful tendencies, sinful desires. And that is why we desire sin. You may wonder, why am I like this? Why do I, maybe, like Prince Albert, he did drugs. Oh, what a terrible thing. But why? What is strange about that? Nothing is strange. We are all Prince Albert. We are all the same. Original sin has come down from Adam because he's the federal head and the legal representative. We have all sinned in him. When he sinned, we sinned. Now, I'm going to go into the second part because there's so much more to study. What's the other sin I told you? Okay. Imputed sin. Is this scriptural? Of course. Romans 5:13. Sin is not imputed. So, Paul is speaking of imputed sin. He is talking of imputed. Where have you come across this word before? Tell me exactly what the topic was. The Great Exchange. How many of you remember the Great Exchange? Do you remember anything about the Great Exchange of Calvary? When we came to Calvary, we came as sinners, and there Jesus is the perfect sinless Son of God. What happened at Calvary? We exchanged identities. Jesus didn't become a sinner. We didn't become righteous. But His righteousness was credited to us. Like credit. Exactly. His righteousness is credited to our account. And our sin is credited to his account. Do you remember the story I shared when I was talking of the great exchange? That's the other great exchange. The first time I shared great exchange. Socks, yes. You remember all these stories, huh? So, do you remember my friend, my brother and I were with a friend, and we were going to play this game called Dark Room. So we switch off all the lights, and I go around trying to catch one of them, and when I catch them, I have to identify them. So I was told to catch them. I said, okay, I'm ready. Just before they switched the light, I noticed my friend had come from out. He was still wearing his socks. I didn't say anything. I knew it. The moment the lights went off, I ran around. But it took me some time to find. The moment I found one, I went straight to the foot, found the socks. I called out his name. The lights came on. I was holding my brother. Do you know why? Just as the lights went off, my friend gave his socks to my brother. And what happened? My friend's identity now has gone to my brother. And I thought it's my friend by touching his socks. They exchanged identities. Did my brother become my friend? No. The identity was exchanged. That is what happened at Calvary. Jesus is now treated as the sinner, and therefore he is punished. We are treated as righteous, and therefore we are spared. This is the great exchange in brief. If you want to understand it, you have to study it yourself. I cannot force you. You need to understand it yourself. So, the word that Paul uses is, Christ's righteousness was imputed to us, and our sin was imputed to Jesus. That means, it's not something physical, but it is like you're crediting an account, exchanging an identity. In that way, his righteousness was imputed to us. Now that's the word imputed. So similarly, imputed sin. What happened when Adam sinned? He became totally depraved, that's true. But a second thing, Adam became guilty before God. Now this is like Prince Albert losing his right to the throne. Stripped of his right to the throne. Exactly that is happening to Adam in the garden. Adam became guilty before God. When I say became guilty, I used to think became guilty means he began to feel guilty. That's not it. Became guilty means you have now lost your innocence, and now you're standing before God condemned. You're standing before God accused. You're standing before God guilty. So this is Adam's state in his relationship to God. Now, that guilt that Adam had with God, that condemnation, that is imputed to us. Adam's guilty status, Adam stripped of his right to God, right to the throne, right to the tree, that has been credited to our account. What is imputed sin then? It means we lose our standing before God. Because Adam lost it, we lose it. Whatever he deserves, we deserve now. Prince Albert did drugs, but his son doesn't inherit that. But in Adam, we inherit. When we inherit Adam's corruption, what is that called? Adam's filthy, depraved, moral corruption has been passed to me. It's all come down to us. What is that? That is original sin. Original sin means something has really gone wrong with me. That is original sin. What is imputed sin? Imputed sin means nothing has changed. No physical thing has passed to me. But like a person being stripped of his right, Adam lost his place with God. Adam is now guilty before God. He is accused before God. That state of being accused is passed down to us. If my father was a gangster or a robber, and he's accused, he's guilty, he's standing before a court, in a court before the judge. He can't pass that guilt to me. But in Adam, that's the thing of Adam, I'm saying. His unique position as the first man is that he was a legal representative of all of us. What he did, we did. So his accused state has become ours, and we are now affected in our relationship with God. Now, two things therefore. The sin, original sin, mean that corruption is now passed down. His total depravity has been passed to me. That is now my original sin. What is my imputed sin? It means Adam's legal status. He's now condemned. He's standing in a court before God, and God says, you are no more my son. You are now an enemy. Your standing with me is over. Whatever happened to Adam that day, it is our state too. And that is how we are born. Now, what is the punishment for this? Original sin, imputed sin together. What is the punishment for it? The wages of sin, or the penalty of sin, is death.
Truth offends, but truth sets free.